Hey everyone, this is the second segment. You have Eric and Elliot trying out a podcast style chit chat. So, our second topic is about advanced care paramedics dropping their 5.0. So, going from ACP to a PCP and the ramifications of doing such. We've had a few members inquire and we've looked into it. So, we've had a legal review completed. And we did discuss at the May union meeting. So we'll go into a bit more depth here, and President Davis will go over what we found.
Thanks, Eric. So I guess I'd like to start with taking us back to the beginning. And I mean, there's probably no surprise to anyone listening. I talk a lot and I always want to talk more. But here goes. When we changed from our 7-person station, everyone was on the ambulance 50% of the time, typically including lieutenants. When we made that transition to the CRU, it changed a lot of things. And what we began to notice when we endeavored to run 4 advanced life support ground ambulances and 2 advanced life support CRUs, and when the ambulances became 3-person to 2-person, what we had was 2 firefighters of the same seniority. If one was an advanced care paramedic and another was a primary care paramedic, we saw at a certain seniority level, the primary care paramedic just on the ambulance left less often. And that just seemed to happen operationally, not by design. It just is the way that it is. The challenge, and obviously I have a bias because I'm an advanced care paramedic and so does Eric. And this isn't to slam PCPs in the least. But we think that advanced care paramedics should have an equal opportunity to have as long and as healthy of careers as primary care paramedics. And what I mean by that is if throughout your career, you're tethered to the ambulance because of the advanced care designation that you hold, we also know that people working on an ambulance for a career don't have careers. They don't make it to retirement. Find me a jurisdiction that's retiring healthy, happy paramedics after 30 years career, and I'll find you a unicorn, because I've never found a jurisdiction that can market that. So we don't believe as an association, a trade union who represents all of its members, that one demographic should have lesser of a chance to have as long and or as healthy of a career as another. So we understand what's been happening, what our members have been bringing to our attention. And I think we've even had some members talk to our employer, whether it was human resources or fire chief or deputy chief, I should say, or who it may have been. But the point is, we know we've had some advanced care paramedics exploring the opportunity to change their status with the Alberta College of Paramedics to a primary care paramedic. Those that have explored it have reported back that it's not a complicated thing to do with ACP. I think it's a phone call away, maybe an email, and it's a couple of days delay, and then it's done. So because you register yourself and the employer reimburses you for a registration fee, you also don't need your employer's permission to, I think the term at ACP is a demotion, although I'm not positive, but to demote your status at ACP, you can do unilaterally. But the question then becomes, if an ACP were to do that, to get some reprieve from the ambulance and to change the course of their career to be on the ambulance less, but I also want to be clear, it's not lost on me. This isn't about not being on the ambulance. This is more about having a healthy and longer career. So, well, what would the employer do is the question, I think. And we don't know. I don't think the employer knows, to be really honest. We have noticed when we've read through the job descriptions, an interesting variancy, probably more than anything, which is the firefighter job description states something, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to read it word for word, but something to the effect of, as a firefighter, you must maintain registration with the Alberta College of Paramedics as an ACP or a PCP. But then when you read the officer's job description, it says that you must maintain your designation with the Alberta College of Paramedics. So just by reading the job descriptions, it says to me, well, maybe there's permission space for a firefighter to pick one. But then oddly enough, when you become a lieutenant, you can't pick. So I suspect more than anything, it was an oversight and a choice of words in the job description, and the employer themselves would very likely say, no, we'll pay and you maintain your status, whatever that may have been. And there's, I guess, where we're at. So what we've done is we don't anticipate the employer would welcome this because it could jeopardize their ability to run an advanced life support service, which they're under contract to provide to AHS It's also the service delivery that they want to do for the community. So we don't imagine they'd welcome it, but you are the one who can choose to do that with ACP. So where would that leave you, I think, is the question. Of course, we don't have the answer, but we felt compelled to get a legal opinion. And the reason is, even if you were to choose to do this, we think part of our obligation, and we know we have this by labor code, is we have to rise to the duty of fair representation, meaning we have to represent you. Even if that means you make a decision that we don't want you to make, we want you to know the consequences. That's representing you. So we got a hold of our lawyer who's been practicing labor law for decades and well-respected in our industry and amongst other locals, and asked him basically this question. And we had him on a Zoom call to talk to him about it. And he said, the question was basically this: has any local been down this road? And if so, how does the story end for the member? And he kind of scratched his head and said, well, nothing comes to mind. And I said, well, what do you mean? How could that be? And he said, well, in Canada, there's, other than Kitimat, BC, integrated locals are in Alberta. Of that, there's 7 of them now. There was more before, but there's 7 of them now. And of course, Strathcona is a very involved local in Alberta. So he said to me, Elliot, if it had happened, you'd probably be aware of it, which we're not. So, that was the question when we asked him, what's the case law? And the case law meaning, if someone's done this and then had to go in front of an arbitrator or establish precedent, that's what we mean by case law. What's been done? Who can we compare to? What's been done before? And really, it sounds like the answer to that is nil. So then the follow-up question was, well, what's your theory or the jurisprudence being the theory of law? So what's your theory on this? And this is where lawyers hate it. They don't want to give me a theoretical answer to a practical question, because circumstances very, very much matter. So nothing I'm about to tell you is 100% certain, nothing we would ever hold our lawyer to, because we don't really know how the cookie crumbles until it does in this case. But he said this: he agrees the employer would not welcome this. And I said, well, do you think they would discipline? He said, well, likely, because if they don't discipline, the second person who's getting itchy to do it will just do it. The third person will do it. And then what's to stop really everybody from doing it and then jeopardizing the employer's ability to operate at an ALS level? So he said, the job descriptions are one thing, that maybe it's a loophole, maybe it's not. He said, and even if it is, if the firefighter can do it, but the officer can't, if you remember what I said about job descriptions, he said, well, the employer will just change the job descriptions and you'll have no leg to stand on if that's the leg to stand on. So he said, so the question, disciplinary, he said, yes, likely. To what? And I said, well, to what degree? Because I know that there's some people on our membership that if they were to take a full tour suspension without pay, maybe even a month suspension without pay, it would still maybe would be worth it for them. So I said, what's the degree of discipline? He said, well, I don't know. Likely suspension is kind of the rough answer. And I said, well, okay, do you think someone would get terminated? And he said, well, likely not. And the reason likely not is because we're actively recruiting PCPs and ACPs. And we're actively promoting PCPs. So operationally, to make this move unilaterally, it's not like you render yourself useless to the employer and therefore they must terminate. So he doesn't think termination would be likely, but it's out there, it's a potential. And then I said, well, I have some members who may be willing to roll the dice. They may feel so strongly about it or may feel so fed up with the system that they say, terminate me because I was going to quit anyways. So I said, so what do we do if that happens? And he said, well, what you have to hear, and this is what I want the membership to understand, if you're prepared to roll the dice and risk a termination to do this, our lawyer's advice was this: what would be your measure of success? So if someone gets terminated for this and we do a grievance, we would probably lose at first stage. We would take it to second stage, which is to the commissioner. Well, we would probably lose it there because the commissioner is probably going to want to back up their director and decision making. So then we take it to an arbitrator. So to get to an arbitrator right now, and there's been a latency period added to it because of COVID, but it's going to take a year to get your case heard by an arbitrator. So could you go a whole year without an income waiting for an arbitration? I don't think I know I couldn't, and I don't think many of us could. And then if you do have a job, if you did get a job between termination and the arbitration, that will form part of the arbitrator's decision. They're less likely to reinstate you or to treat you more favorably when you've demonstrated that you can just move on and get a new job. Your compensation or remuneration for damages are less. Then, what's the measure of success at an arbitrator? Now, we probably all think a successful wrongful termination arbitration would be reinstated with full seniority, no loss of rank, full back pay, and damages. That's not necessary. That's a whole other argument for a lawyer, what the damages should be, even if they rule that you've been damaged and wrongfully dismissed. It may just be reinstatement. It may be reinstatement with no back pay, and it may be reinstatement with a loss of seniority, or it may just be a neutral letter of employment or a slightly better severance. Point is, it can be a real crapshoot on what you'd expect that outcome to be with an arbitrator. So I think that on the topic of going from ACP to PCP, that's the legal opinion. It sounds very risky to me as your union president and your executive board. We will not be advising anyone to do this. There's too many unknowns. It doesn't seem to be practical, but albeit, and I understand, we have many members really grappling with this and really struggling with this. And it's probably no real consolation to know that we're doing what we can to apply pressure internally with things like a seniority-based board, a better contract with AHS that provides more operational flexibility, and trying to really shift a culture from within. But I think that that is the better pathway forward than a member unilaterally dropping their status from ACP to PCP and rolling the dice on what that outcome may be. With that, Eric, I think that's probably all I have on the topic, unless you've got any more to add.
Yeah, so to sum it up, sounds like you could go to ACP and drop your 5-0 to a 4-0. But there is a large risk of ramifications from the employer. Okay, so that's the end of our second topic. Join us for episode 3, where we'll talk about attendance management.